What's up guys, Asian here with the first PTS patch notes for the Greymoor PTS. This is update 6.0.0. So just like our previous chapter elsewhere, I will be breaking up the first set of PTS patch notes into sections. In this instance, we'll be breaking it up into Greymoor new sets, and then we'll be discussing the itemization changes that have been happening, and then we'll top things off with the discussion of the skill changes and just generic combat changes as well. Not quite as much compared to elsewhere, because elsewhere did see a huge rebalance among all the different classes, so if you guys go back about a year ago, you'll find that the elsewhere PTS patch notes videos were split up between classes. It's not the case here because Greymoor was not really marketed as a huge class rebalance. This is more itemization balance changes instead, as well as the new stuff that's coming in with Greymoor. So this video will be all about the Greymoor things, so this is all the new things that are coming in with the chapter. So this is the start of things. So the new zone is called Western Skyrim / Blackreach. Not sure if it's just going to be Western Skyrim or Blackreach, but this is where we are going. Everybody is able to play through the Greymoor PTS as long as you have access to the PTS server itself. So console players, you will need to have the PC version of the game in order to participate on the PTS, but there's also no NDA, so you're able to stream anything you would like on the PTS, although they do kind of warn you, not necessarily warn you, but they try to discourage you from spoiling anything from the Greymoor Chapter main quest. So just do us a favor and try to avoid any spoilers if you do decide to stream or create content using the Greymoor PTS. So Greymoor includes 6 delves, 6 world bosses, 2 public dungeons, set crafting stations, the Harrow Storms, which is basically more or less the dolmen mechanics, and obviously do quests and achievements. Now, with Greymoor comes the Antiquities system. So this is introducing 2 new skill lines and a new tool where you'll be able to uncover furnishings, equipment, mount, and possibly more. They're probably going to add on to this with more and more DLC stuffs. So to begin, you visit what's called the Antiquarian Circle, located in the City of Solitude. There you speak with Verita Numita, who will introduce you to the Antiquarian's Eye and teach you the skills needed to begin seeking antiquities. You can then strike out on your own, or continue to learn more about the Antiquarian's Eye and how the antiquity system works from Verita and Gabriel Benil. If you guys remember, Gabriel Benil is, I believe, a recurring character from the DC main storyline there, main Alliance storyline. So in leads, in most cases, before you can scry for an antiquity, you need to obtain a lead. Leads can be found in a wide variety of ways and places throughout the world, and do not require you to be an antiquarian to obtain them. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it antiquarian correctly, but that's what we're sticking with because it just rolls off the tongue. Some leads may require you to have done other tasks before you can attain them, exploring a zone, completing a quest, or digging up other antiquities. Leads expire 30 days after you obtain them. You can always obtain them again. Leads can be found almost anywhere from nearly any activity. They have a couple of hints here, though. The rarer the antiquity, the more specific, hidden, or mysterious its source. Lead sourcing is often related, directly or indirectly, to the antiquity it will lead. So, for instance, if you're looking for leads to antiquities concerning Glenumbra's history, you're going to need to look in Glenumbra. Some leads are already known to somebody else. Try defeating powerful foes, speaking with shopkeepers, or checking in treasure hoards big and small. And when in doubt, poke around and explore. You may find a new lead when and where you least expect to. So scrying, excavating, and the Antiquarian's Eye. Once you have obtained a lead, you learn a little bit about the antiquity, enough to scry for it. Then you can scry for it from your journal or from the map. You must be in the correct zone in order to scry for the antiquity, and once you have successfully excavated the antiquity, you learn a little lore about it. Now, they do have a list of the antiquities here, and they are basically called Mythic items. You have 6 of them starting off. Each of these is split into 5 fragments, so you need to find all 5 fragments in order to create each of these 6 antiquities. You have Bloodlord's Embrace, which is a heavy chest, Malekith's Band of Brutality, which is a ring, and it also requires Orsinium DLC. Ring of the Wild Hunt, which is also a ring, requires the Murkmire DLC. Snow Treaders, which are medium feet. Torque of Tonal Constancy, which is a neck. Thrassian Stranglers, which are light hands and requires the Somerset Chapter. So you'll have 3 of these available to you from the base game, but 3 of them do require other DLCs. You have the Dwarven Ebon Wolf Mount, which is split into 17 fragments found throughout the base game and a Western Skyrim. You have furnishings for nearly all zones in the game. You have 3 motifs: Ancestral, Altmer, Nord, and Orc. You have cosmetic options. You have what's called the Aldmeri Symphonium, a new music box furnishing split into 3 fragments. This requires the Thieves Guild DLC. A magicka lance siege weapon in fire, ice, and shock varieties. A new emotion, Eleanor Alamande, which requires the Somerset Chapter. You have some new treasures, 3 per zone, and then obviously more furnishings. Next, we have the Trial Kyne's Aegis, which is a keep on an island north of Solitude. The original intent was to be a bulwark against northern invasions, probably from the home place of the Nords, which approached the well, there's a lot of spelling errors here, which approached the coast via the easiest channel. Thane Ogvar was given ownership over the fort and over time morphed into a northern fishing village in addition to a fort. The island's gold veins have led to the Thane establishing a mining operation. Until recently, the fort has remained peaceful, with only the occasional northern squall cropping up to cause concern. The transformation of the island to a fishing and mining spot has led to the slow decline of the fort. I am reading this as though I am a DM for D&D. Well, regardless, this is the new trial where we will be fighting against sea giants and half giants, as well as a powerful vampire lord. It's a 12-player trial with normal and vet difficulties. You have obviously item sets from the trial, including perfected versions, which are found only on veteran, so very similar to Sunspire. You can get a unique skin, a new and unique multiplayer memento by completing all achievements within the trial, several titles, and of course the housing items. Now going into the new sets. You have 3 overland sets, 3 crafted sets, and 4 trial sets for a total of 10 new sets introduced into the game. For the overland sets, the light armor is Winter's Respite. You have magicka regen and 2 max magicka bonuses. Casting abilities that leave an effect on the ground will create a circle of healing frost for 10 seconds, restoring 2358 health every second while you're inside the circle. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So pretty much raw healing, not really going to be seeing much use in PvE because it's easy enough to get healing done. You don't need another set to help you out with that. Venomous Smite is the medium armor set. You have 2 weapon crit lines and 1 weapon damage line. Dealing critical damage inflicts Hunter's Venom on your enemy for 2241 poison damage to your target and nearby enemies every second. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. Now, this does not tell us how long Hunter's Venom will last. If it lasts for 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, we don't know. But this might be kind of a poor man's Azure Blights. Definitely possibly good for trash fights, but generally speaking, there's probably going to be better sets you can run besides this set for trash fights. Eternal Vigor is the heavy armor set. You have magicka regen, stam regen, health regen, max health, and the 5-piece adds 337 stamina and magicka regen while your health is above 50%, and it adds 1011 health regen while your health is 50% or less. So different bonuses depending on where your health is at. Again, probably not going to be seeing too much play in PvE. This definitely sounds more selfish, which really isn't really what you want as a tank in PvE content. Now for your 3 crafted sets, you have Stoon's Favor, so you have weapon spell damage, physical spell pen, weapon spell damage again, and it increases your spell and physical pen by a whopping 13,355 against off-balance enemies. It's probably going to be more for PvP, less so for PvE. It could be possible that they did possibly do a typo perhaps on the 5-piece, but considering it is a 5-piece, likely not. But again, more for PvP probably, less for PvE, just because it's pretty easy to get pen cap in PvE content. Dragon's Appetite, you have 2 stam regen lines and 1 weapon damage line. The 5-piece increases your damage done to bleeding enemies by 225. This is a flat damage increase, so be sure to check out my prior videos taking a look at Hjalnar's and the Stonefist Stagger debuff to kind of learn how damage done, flat damage done bonuses sort of interact with other damage bonuses. Dealing non-bleed damage to bleeding enemies generates a persistent stack of Dragon's Appetite up to once per second. After 10 stacks, you consume Dragon's Appetite and heal for 6415. Again, probably not going to be seeing a lot of use in PvE, just because you don't really need the heal. Could be useful, perhaps, for like solo stuff, or people who just want some additional healing sustain, but Briarheart's probably going to be better for than Dragon's Appetite in that regard. Then you have Spell Parasite, which gives you spell damage, spell crit, max magicka. Whenever you deal damage, you restore 63 magicka. This effect can occur once every quarter of a second. So this essentially gives you, if I'm doing my math correctly, it should give you 252 magicka per second if you're able to proc it every quarter second here. So could be useful for beginner PvE players, magicka DPS, that need a set to run while they're farming for other better sets. This pretty much falls in line with like the Julianos Newman Acolyte, where it's decent for a crafted set, but it does lose out to those two sets. So in terms of crafted sets, useful if you have sustained problems, but if you're just looking for raw DPS potential, Julianos and Newman Acolyte are going to be the better sets to craft. Moving on to the trial sets, there are 4 trial sets here. Roaring Opportunist is the magicka DPS set. It adds Spell Pen, Minor Slayer, Spell Damage. Perfect version adds Max Magicka on the 5-piece. The 5-piece dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack to an enemy that's been set off balance grants you and up to 11 group members Major Slayer, increasing your damage done to dungeon, trial, and arena monsters by 15% for 10 seconds. Roaring Opportunist can affect a target every 22 seconds. So this is a per-target cooldown, not a global cooldown. So if you have 2 or more targets, you could just swap back and forth between them every 10 seconds to get that 100% uptime on Major Slayer. But for bosses with only just the boss, no trial, no ads or anything like that, you're going to have a max uptime of 45%. So that's pretty low if you think about it. With Lachesis, you can get about 60% uptime with just a single synergy. So for stam heavy groups, you're probably not going to be seeing Roaring Opportunist being used. But for magicka heavy groups, this is potentially a good set to run on a healer. 45% Major Slayer uptime is roughly what you would get from something like a magicka Nightblade or a magicka Templar running Master Architect, except with Roaring Opportunists, you do have to pay attention to the off-balance cooldown. Make sure you're doing that heavy attack when off-balance is active, and it grants it to everybody rather than just 3 people with Master Architect. So for magicka heavy groups, this is a set that I would consider picking up. For stamina heavy groups, though, Lachesis is going to be better. Even though it is a per-target cooldown, you will need to have 2 targets in order to get close to 100% uptime on the Roaring Opportunist. So it's possible that you could use this on stamina sets, but it does require a little bit more sort of, a little bit more coordination. Yandir's Might is the stamina DPS set. It adds weapon damage, minor slayer, stamina regen. The perfect version adds physical penetration. The 5-piece dealing critical damage grants you a stack of Giant's Endurance up to 1 a second. Each stack of Giant's Endurance adds 100 stamina regen up to 5 stacks. Dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack removes Giant's Endurance and grants you Giant's Might for 10 seconds, increasing your weapon damage by 158 per stack removed. So if you're doing the math here, that ends up being, let's see here, 750 plus 40, 790 additional weapon damage with the 5 stacks. You can't have Giant's Endurance and Might active at the same time. So this is a fairly interesting set. So you basically have a burst of regen followed by a burst of weapon damage. So this is fairly interesting, especially if you consider that this is essentially 66% uptime on that 790 additional weapon damage. So if we go ahead and do the math there, that ends up being, just off the top of my head here, just mathing it out, this should be, roughly speaking, the equivalent of about 267, if I did my math right. Might be a little bit less than that, 267 weapon damage, which is actually not a lot. So I'm not anticipating Yandir's Might being very good for stamina DPS, particularly with the proc condition being a fully charged heavy attack. There's probably going to be stronger sets out there, especially when you consider the uptimes. Kyne's Wind is the healing set, adds magicka regen, minor Aegis, healing done. The perfected version adds magicka regen. Casting an ability or drinking a potion that applies a major buff to yourself or an ally creates a pool of Kyne's Blessing for 4 seconds. You and ally standing in Kyne's Blessing restores 508 stamina and magicka every second. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So this pretty much gives you roughly a little over 200 resources per second if you're casting this on a cooldown. Now you do need to have something that applies a major buff to yourself or an ally. So Good example of this would be something like a Warden Healer, which can run something like Expansive Frostcloak, which gives major resolve. So you just run that every 10 seconds, you're able to provide some additional resources. Now, it doesn't really state whether it procs on yourself, how big the pool is, so we're going to go into PTS and see just how big it is, the pool itself. But for stacked fights, I can see this being pretty useful to help out its overall sustain. But it really is going to be dependent on, one, how much sustain has changed in this patch, and two, how big the pool is. Finally, we have Roll's Command, which is the tank set, adds max stamina, minor Aegis, max health, and then the perfect version adds healing taken. After dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you apply major Aegis to you and up to 5 nearby group members for 10 seconds, reducing damage taken from dungeon, trial, and arena enemies by 15%. This effect can occur once every 28 seconds. I can tell you right now, not going to be used in PvE because Major Aegis is a pretty much useless buff. It does help reduce damage, but it's not really all that beneficial. You're better off running something that increases damage instead rather than reducing the damage that's incoming. Now, it could be useful for progression style groups, but even in progression sort of groups, you might be better off just trying to kill things faster so you don't have to take as much damage over time. So, not a very good set. This is probably going to be a decon set. Finally, let's talk about the mythic items. So you have 6 different mythic items here. Bloodlord's Embrace is the heavy chest. Dealing damage with the bash attacks places a persistent, uncleanable blood curse on an enemy. You can only have one blood curse enemy at a time, and dealing additional bash damage moves the blood curse. Blocking an attack from a blood cursed enemy restores 685 magicka to you. This effect can occur every 1 second. This is clearly more of a tanking oriented set here, and it's actually not that bad if you're looking for a selfish set. Now, I've already talked about these mythic items and what you have to sacrifice in order to use this set here. So you're basically giving up a Maj Helm set more or less in order to use Bloodlord's Embrace or a 5-piece bonus. So you are going to be giving up something like Symphony of Blade, Lord Warden, or some other Maj Helm set to run this particular set here for a selfish additional magicka restore. You already have things like Balance that's able to restore magicka to you, albeit at a cost of health, but you know that health cost is fairly manageable because you do obviously have heals coming from your healer. So I don't really see Bloodlord's Embrace being all that useful on a tank just because of the cost that you're going to need to incur in order to run Bloodlord's Embrace. Thrassian Stranglers is the light hand set. Killing an enemy grants you a persistent stack of Slode's Call up to a maximum of 20 stacks. Each stack increases your spell damage by 150, but also increases your damage taken by 2%. Removing Thrassian Stranglers, crouching or going invisible removes all stacks of Slode's Call. Now, there are a little bit of weirdness here that we're going to have to figure out on the PTS. Killing an enemy, for example, do you have to do the killing blow, or is it going to be something like False God or VO, where if you're in a group, anybody killing anything gives you that stack of Slode's Call. I've been told that the stacks do not carry over from instance to instance, so for things like Maelstrom Arena, you can't start with 20 stacks and then just burn through the arena like that. You're going to have to rebuild it during each stage, and so on. Also, of course, you have the damage taken. So with 20 stacks, you are getting 3k spell damage, but you're also increasing your damage taken by 40%. This is actually not terrible. This is basically running without any sort of mitigation CPs. And to be honest, if you know mechanics behind things, using VMA as an example, it's actually pretty easy to avoid taking unnecessary damage. So this might be nice for situations like potentially VMA, or maybe if killing an enemy, anybody in your group killing an enemy counts, could be useful to kind of build up to a boss burn for fights. DPS have a little bit less of a opportunity cost when it comes to running Thrassian Stranglers, but it still remains to be seen whether it's going to be making its way to magicka DPS toolkits. I personally don't really see it I don't see it be working its way up there, but it is possible. Snow Treaders are medium feet. You're immune to snares and mobilizations that can be cleansed. While in combat, you cannot sprint. This might actually be beneficial for tanks, possibly, where you have to deal with snares and mobilizations. So could be useful there, since you're not really sprinting in combat to begin with as a tank, but even then, probably not going to be worth giving up your Maj Helm set to do so. Ring of the Wild Hunt increases your movement speed by 15% in combat and 45% while out of combat, so if you need to go zoom, this is the ring for you. Malakath's Band of Brutality increases your damage down by 25%, but you can't deal critical damage. Possibly useful for PvP, maybe, where crit damage is not quite as important. PvE, on the other hand, crit damage is very important, so we're not going to be using this ring at all. Torque of Tonal Constancy is the next piece. Your stamina is less than 50%, you increase magicka regen by 450. While your magicka is less than 50%, increase your stamina regen by 450. This might be beneficial for PvP, perhaps, getting some more roll dodges out of the way and things like that. But this sort of like weirdness with your stamina is low, so we're going to increase magicka regen. It's very situational, so I'm not sure if it's going to be used in PvP even. Beyond that, you obviously have new collectibles, you have new achievements, you have new dies and titles. You have new homes. There's 3 new homes that are being introduced with Greymoor in Western Skyrim. You have Snowmelt Suite, Proudspire Manor, if you guys remember Proudspire Manor from Skyrim, and you have Bastion Sanguinaris, which is going to be the vampire-based housing. Then obviously you have new furnishing, new motifs that are being introduced by completing delves and world bosses, as well as the Antiquities system, obviously. Then you have new crafting ingredients. So you have Crimson Nirnroot and Val Coagulant. You have Chorus Eggs, and they all carry a new effect called Minor Timidity. Timidity? Within the alchemy system, timidity is the opposite trait of heroism, so reagents with the heroism trait will cancel combination with the timidity trait, and vice versa. Minor timidity is a debuff that consumes target's ultimate points while in combat. When a poison with timidity trait is procced on a target, it will consume the target's ultimate points for a short amount of time. It doesn't really say whether it's return it to you. There's probably a secondary effect where it also grants you minor courage, or not minor courage, minor heroism, but remains to be seen. We have to test it to see what the PTS is all about here. Then there is a new essence rune known as Indeco, which can be obtained as bonus loot from the Antiquities system, and can be used to create new jewelry glyphs, prismatic recovery, and reduce skill costs. So as these two imply, prismatic recovery will give you magicka, stamina, health regen. Reduce skill cost is probably just going to reduce your the skill cost for your magicka and stamina abilities. So possibly good glyphs to use on maybe tanks or healers. That's all the stuff that's going into the Greymoor section of the PTS. As always, there will be a link in the description below to the patch notes, so you can read the entirety of the patch notes at your own leisure. Coming up will be the discussion over the new skills, as well as just combat changes in general, as well as the itemization changes that have taken place as of Greymoor. So look forward to that. They should be out at the same time as this video. That concludes this section of the PTS review. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.